Here we're going to look at another proportion reality problem. So here we have three parts. For part A, it is given that y is directly proportional to the expression x plus 1 and y equals 2 when x equals 9. We need to find the value of y when x is equal to 3, and then we need to find the value of x when y is equal to 3. By the definition of direct proportion, we know that y must be equal to k times, in this case it will be x plus 1 instead of x. And then we can substitute the values of y equals 2 and x equals 9 to our equation right here. So this becomes 2 is equal to k times 9 plus 1, that will be just 10. So our constant k must be equal to 1 over 5. It is enough to substitute the value of a variable to solve for the other one. So for example, when x equals 3, y will be equal to 1 over 5 times 3 plus 1, that will be 4 over 5. And when y equals 3, we can set this y to be equal to 3, and then just simply solve for x. Solving this, you'll get that x will be equal to 14. Now for part B, it is given that d is inversely proportional to the square root of m. When m equals 9, d is equal to 64. We need to find the value of d when m equals 4, and then we need to find the value of m when d equals 32. By the definition of inverse proportion, we know that d must be equal to k over the square root of m for some constant k. Now we can substitute the values of m and d being 9 and 64 respectively to get that 64 must be equal to k over the square root of 9, that would just 3, which means that our constant k must be equal to 192. With this, we can solve part 1 and part 2 pretty easily. So when m equals 4, d will be equal to 192 over the square root of 4, that would just 2, those will be 96. And when d equals 32, we can set an equation in terms of m and then solve it for m. This leaves us with an answer of m being equal to 36. Now for part C, we know that 10 workers take 24 days to paint a house. Assuming that every worker works at a constant rate, how many more workers are needed to paint the house in 8 days? We can take the advantage that the time needed to complete a certain project is inversely proportional to the number of workers working on that project. Here it is described by this equation right here. So t represents the time and n resembles the number of workers, and k here is our constant. So from our question, we know that t is 24 and n is equal to 10. So solving this, we get that k, our constant, must be equal to 240. Now here we can substitute the value of t being 8 to solve for n. So when t equals 8, we know that 8 times n is equal to 240, and therefore our value of n must be equal to 30. But since the question is asking us how many more workers, we can take our new value of n being 30 and then subtract it with 10 to get a final answer of 20, which ends this video.